Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Podcast Pasta. That's a podcast that's like pasta, not the podcast that's about pasta. As always, I'm your host, Mike. And today I kind of want to give my thoughts on like family sitcoms as well as discuss the kind of weird nature I think they find themselves in, especially in the modern streaming era. Now, before I continue further, I guess I should specify that for the sake of this discussion, and typically, at least for myself, I don't know if other critics do this, but usually when I talk about like family sitcoms, I make a point to distinguish between the difference between like animated family sitcoms and live action family sitcoms. Simply because I think like a lot of story trends and a lot of, concepts that work with animated family sitcoms don't necessarily translate to live action and versa. That's not to say that there isn't any overlap between the two. Like I think, there is like a shared there are certain sorry, certain shared trends between both. For example, like, the typical dynamic of like a nagging wife and like a dim-witted husband. But, I think like in general, and for the sake of this conversation, I'm just going to be focusing on like live action family sitcoms and not animated. So, I mentioned it before briefly in other episodes, but I'm not the biggest fan of live action family sitcoms. Nothing against the genre itself, and as I'll get to later, I have actually watched a few myself, but it's more so I just don't think I'm necessarily in the target demographic for those shows. I think those shows are kind of conceived with the idea that it's easy watching for families during dinner time, just something to put on while you're enjoying your meal. And, saying as how I'm like a single guy doesn't really pertain to me. Again, not saying that like if you don't fit in that demographic, you can't enjoy these shows. A lot of people obviously do with, their prominence over the years. But I'm just saying that's probably why I don't gravitate towards those shows the way that other people do. However, I do have kind of one working theory with that. And I'm not sure if I'm the only person to like talk about this at length or to even like kind of come up with this, but I kind of do theorize that everyone kind of has that one family sitcom that they have like a soft spot for, mainly because, it's the show they grew up with, right? Because that's like the appeal of family sitcoms is that, the idea is that, you grow up with the characters as your family like grows, right? And it's supposed to like, you know, define generations and things like that and kind of show trends at the time and different attitudes of certain things at the moment that they are conceived. Right. Again, not to say that you can't enjoy it from outside the time period that they were created, but I think broadly that's like the main draw of a lot of family sitcoms. But for me, that the show that would fit into that category is kind of dating myself here. Malcolm in the Middle. Right. Now, to prepare for this episode, I kind of decided to do a rewatch of the whole series, watching it like I did way back in like, I don't know, premiered like 2000s or so. But watching it while eating dinner, right? And for the most part, I will say it does hold up pretty well. I do like a lot of the characters. I think there are a lot of like really good, strong, funny moments. However, there are like a lot of episodes that I just hated. I could not stand at all. Like, not even like the worst in terms of like family sitcoms, but I think the worst in terms of like, you know, television in general. I just hated some episodes of the show, but I think overall it holds up. It holds up and works pretty well. What kind of interesting thing about it is that it kind of has this weird. I don't know if I'd call it a problem, but you do notice that with Malcolm in the Middle, like a lot of other shows from the 2000s, that it is scored with how would I describe it? Like very corporate safe 2000s grunge rock. And if you've listened to like, or if you've like watched Scrubs, or Malcolm Middle or other shows from the 2000s, you know the type of music I'm talking about, right? Like it's supposed to kind of capture the very nihilistic and angsty mood of the era, but again filtered through like very product safe lens. And so in some ways it kind of feels dated, but in other ways it kind of feels like an interesting time capsule of like the era. So you could take that for what you will. Not a mark against the show, just wanting to point that out. For me, what makes Malcolm in the Middle work though is like because like these family sitcoms, in order to like differentiate themselves over the years, you kind of have to like develop your own I guess how would I say like gimmick, right? Whether it's like how the show is shot or like what you focus on in the show or like what have you. Every show kind of has like its own like gimmick to make it stand out. And Malcolm in the Middle kind of had two. One was like a focus on like a very low income family, which granted I think that premise would be done better in like something like Bob's Burgers, but again, not necessarily fair for this comparison because live action animated, what have you. But the other one was, at least in early seasons, how they handled their differentiation between their A plot and B plot. So as you may or may not know, sitcoms often they utilize for their 30-minute runtime, they utilize like splitting plots between like their ensemble cast. So like the main plot would be the A plot, and then B plot, and then you got variations between that. Like sometimes you'll have like a smaller C plot happening in the background, but for the most part, it's structured like A plot, B plot. So for Malcolm in the Middle, the A plot often evolved around like the main family unit. So it would be a story revolving around the titular Malcolm, or sometimes Hal or Lois. But the B plot was usually hover around Francis, right? And because Francis is pulled away from the main family unit, initially he's sent to like a military school, for disciplinary purposes. Eventually leaves that and he does like oil drilling in Alaska. And then like the last you mainly get of him, at least with his own like B plot, is he's working on like a ranch run by like a German, you know, couple. Malcolm in the Middle goes places. But the point is, like, that's how the plots were usually split up in a lot of the episodes. And I think I like that because I don't know, I found myself gravitating more towards following, like, Francis's story throughout the series. I kind of wish there was a sitcom with just that premise, right? Of just following, like, this delinquent that, like, leaves his house and, like, as the series goes on, you see him develop as a character, which is what happens with Francis. But I just wish there was more of a focus on him. Like, I guess I kind of wish, I think Malcolm Middle would be better if it was less of a family sitcom, but, for what it is, no, I think it does kind of work real well. And it'll always be that show that I have a soft spot for, even as I don't necessarily say I like family sitcoms. And I think a lot of other people are like that too, at least around my age group. You do see Twitter every now and again, like talk about the show and like people remembering it fondly. Um, but yeah, that was like my main family sitcoms. So going on into like the more modern age, again, I haven't really seen a lot. I saw a little bit of like Modern Family here or there. It's fine. I could see why it won a lot of Emmys, but ultimately, I just don't think the show is for me. Right? Really not the worst in like modern sitcom, television or whatever, but it works for what it is. Uh, and the other one that I've been seeing a little bit recently that I've been kind of getting into because it's the show my brother's been watching while he eats dinner when I go visit him is the Goldbergs, right? I think that's very enjoyable. I can see why it has like kind of its own appeal. The interesting gimmick with that show is kind of like, again, twofold. Part of it is that it's at least in part based on the life of the show's creator, Adam Goldberg. So he'll intersplice, the end of episodes with home movies that he made when he was younger, and you see like the direct kind of reference to like the home movie to what like the episode was about. That's kind of a cool premise. But I think also another is that it really plays a lot to like 80s nostalgia, right? Because Adam Goldberg, the kid character in the show, is like just a fan of every 80s nerd property out there, from like Knight Rider to like AVP, you know. Yeah, yeah, was AVP 80s? Or was that more? Well, it's like, because again, the show lasts for so long, it's like 80s, kind of 90s, right? But like, Alien, Predator, what have you. Like basically all the, really big 80s nerd properties out there. And also seems pretty good. I don't know if I'll ever check it out as like the full series, but I think kind of getting into like the state that modern live action family sitcoms find themselves in. The last, at least from what I recall, the last really big family sitcom to kind of end its run is this at the time of this recording this year we had Young Sheldon end its run. I think it ended like in February or March. I can't remember exactly when of 2024. And Young Sheldon's kind of an interesting case because you know, obviously when it's first started out, I think a lot of the appeal of it was coming from the Big Bang Theory audience, and but I think over time it did manage to find like its own footing as like a family sitcom to the point where I honestly think it's kind of better than Big Bang Theory in terms of like enjoyability and like watchability. Um, Again, I haven't really watched too much of it. A lot of that's just taken from like clips, so maybe people are just clipping the best stuff from that show. But no, I do at the very least see the appeal of it. But with that ending, I honestly don't know what the next really big family sitcom is gonna be. They're trying to set it up to be. The closest I can guess is that I've seen like news talking about how they want to do a spin-off of Young Sheldon, which I know is funny, like a spin-off of a spin-off. But following the older brother in the shows, he starts his family because I think he like marries young in the context of the show or something. Um, I think outside of that, I like don't know what else there is going to really be. And I think part of that kind of stems from like this growing decline. You could say in sitcoms in general, but especially in like family sitcoms, right? And part of that is just the move to streaming, right? Because streaming kind of, at least with the format of streaming, it does hamper a lot of the aspects that like family sitcoms kind of thrive on, that live action family sitcoms kind of thrive on. So, as I kind of briefly mentioned before, one of the appeals of family sitcoms is that you grow up with the characters, but in order to do that, you need these shows to like have a lot of episodes and a lot of like seasons, basically like for syndication, to where you can just air it randomly, right? But as we know, most shows on streaming only last for like 2 or 3 seasons, which really isn't enough time to like. I mean, unless if you like really stagnate the release between seasons, that might be a fun premise actually to purposely stagnate like episode releases. But yeah, outside of that, it's not really conducive in the same way that like network television is for like having these like longer shows and to have being able to have an audience group of characters. So that doesn't help with it. And like I said, in general, it could also just stem from I think a general decline in sitcoms. Like I'm trying to think of like what really big sitcoms got their start on streaming. Like maybe Kim's Convenience, kind of. I haven't really seen anything about that. I've just heard good things. Smith's Creek, maybe. I don't know if you would. I mean, like, kind of. You can maybe classify that as like a family sitcom, but I don't think it's structured in the same way. Um, And I think another drawback with streaming is that, like I said, a lot of the appeal of family sitcoms is that it's supposed to be easy watching, right? It's not supposed to be like overly complicated or anything. But like when you go onto streaming service, if you want easy watching, you could just default to like, watching like a show you've seen 1,000 times, right? Like for myself, I would probably just default to American Dad or maybe Simpsons or something. So I don't know how well like a new show, like a new sitcom would do in that environment where you're competing not only against like other new sitcoms, but also sitcoms of the yesteryears. So you're basically competing like, up and comers against like the giants of like Seinfeld or Malcolm in the Middle or what have you. So I think that kind of creates a harder environment for newer sitcoms to get their start, right? Or to like build an audience, right? Not to say that's impossible, but I think if you want family sitcoms to succeed on streaming, you kind of have to rethink like only make them last like 2 or 3 seasons, and maybe structure like how they're pushed to people. I don't really know. Um, I'm not really sure. And granted, it's not like I'm necessarily rooting for family sitcoms to succeed. I again, I don't really care either way. Um, I guess I will. I mean, I'm not really sure. It could also possibly be that with changing family dynamics, a lot of younger people aren't having families in general, so maybe that's also kind of playing against family sitcoms, um, in a sense. But I'm not really sure. Like maybe that is, but like because you don't have to be, in a family to enjoy a family sitcom, right? Like I've enjoyed playing family sitcoms myself, but again, like there's not as much of a draw to it as compared to like other situations. Maybe it'll still thrive on like network television, right? Because I know we've been saying for years that like, oh, eventually network television is just gonna completely die. But I don't know if I mean, I think we're instead seeing more of a shift of like just an older audience for network television, So with that, you see like a lot of shows on network TV kind of shifting their like audience more older, skewing it more older, which might help like the family sitcom like format to thrive in that environment because, you know, older audience members might have more of a nostalgia for that type of like sitcom, type of formula or what have you. I'm not really sure. I would be very curious to see how it grows and develops in the future. Um, but I think that's mainly. Oh, I guess I should also mention this too. I guess one trend we are kind of seeing with streaming, I don't know if it's really going to continue much, is kind of the revival of old like sitcom shows, where usually they get like an additional 1 or 2 seasons after their main run. So we've seen this, I think like Fuller House. Um, well, Fuller House is like the main family sitcom that I've seen had this trend, but we've seen this trend with like Frasier and like How I Met Your Mother and whatever. Again, across the board, I just don't think that's been working for a lot of people. The only one that's really seen a lot of success from that is How I Met Your not How I Met Your Mother. I think the spinoff is called like How I Met Your Father or something. That's been doing okay. I don't know if they're still continuing with it or not. Um, but yeah, it hasn't really helped like the family sitcom scene. Like the only ones that have tried to get revivals is like Full House with Fuller House, which I think ended almost immediately or something like that. It didn't really last very long, and no, I don't know if I would really count that '70s show as like a sitcom. I mean, kind of a weird one, maybe. I don't know. No, I don't know if I would count that '70s show as like a sitcom. But they tried to have the revival with that '90s show, which I think recently announced they weren't going to do any more of that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think like the revival route for streaming is going to work for family sitcoms. Like again, I think um oh my god, you know what? I just remember that the Connors was the thing doing this episode right now. I don't know how well that's doing. I mean, the only main thing I know about that is like the whole debacle with Roseanne Barr like having to leave the show or whatever. So I don't know if that show's still doing well, but yeah, I mean maybe that'll be like the big family sitcom for a while, but we'll have to see. But no, thank you all so much for joining me. That's all I have to really say on this. I guess as my final thoughts at the time of this recording, I'm waiting for Arcane Part 2, so I would definitely recommend that if you're looking for stories about not families, but found families, or what have you. But I think that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much and take care.